Have you ever wondered how one man could lead an entire nation down a path of such destruction? How did Adolf Hitler, a failed artist and corporal in World War I, rise to become the absolute dictator of Germany? The story is more complex than you might think. It's not just about one man's ambition. It's a tale of a nation's desperation, economic collapse, political infighting, and a series of fatal miscalculations by those who thought they could control him. Let's peel back the layers and uncover the real story behind Hitler's rise to power. To truly understand how this happened, we have to go back to the end of World War I. Germany was defeated, and the victorious Allies imposed the Treaty of Versailles. This wasn't just a peace treaty. For many Germans, it felt like a national humiliation. Germany lost territory, its colonies were taken away. Its military was severely restricted, and most critically, it was forced to accept sole responsibility for the war and pay crippling reparations. Imagine your country being blamed for a global catastrophe and then handed a bill so enormous it would take decades to pay off. This created a deep-seated resentment and a powerful desire for a leader who would restore Germany's honor and tear up the treaty. The stab in the back? Myth began to circulate, the idea that the German army hadn't been defeated on the battlefield but was betrayed by politicians and revolutionaries at home. This narrative provided a simple, dangerous scapegoat and fertile ground for extremist ideologies. Into this climate of anger and humiliation stepped the fledgling Weimar Republic, Germany's first attempt at a democracy. From the start, it was plagued with problems. Its leaders were associated with the hated Treaty of Versailles, so it was never truly embraced by a large part of the population. The political system was based on proportional representation, which sounds fair, but in practice it led to a fragmented parliament with dozens of small parties. No single party could ever win a majority, meaning governments were always fragile coalitions that could collapse at any moment. This constant political instability made it impossible to tackle Germany's massive problems effectively. It was like trying to build a house during a constant earthquake. People grew tired of the bickering and inefficiency, and they started to lose faith in democracy itself. They longed for a strong, decisive leader who could cut through the noise and get things done. Then came the economic tidal wave, the hyperinflation of 1923. To pay its war debts, the government started printing more and more money. The result was catastrophic. The German currency, the mark, became worthless. People's life savings were wiped out overnight. You'd see photos of people using wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread, or children using stacks of banknotes as building blocks because they were cheaper than toys. This economic trauma destroyed the middle class, the traditional bedrock of a stable society. While Germany managed to stabilize its currency with international help and enjoyed a brief period of prosperity in the mid-1920s, the psychological scars remained. People were terrified of losing everything again. This period of relative calm was shattered in 1929 with the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression. The American loans that had been propping up the German economy dried up overnight. Businesses failed, banks collapsed, and unemployment skyrocketed. By 1932, 1 in 3 Germans was out of a job. People were starving. They were desperate. They stood in breadlines, lost their homes, and saw no hope for the future. The Weimar government seemed powerless to stop the downward spiral. It was in this atmosphere of absolute desperation that people began to look for radical solutions. When the mainstream parties have no answers, people start listening to the extremists who do, and that's where Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came in. Hitler was a charismatic and powerful speaker. He didn't just give speeches. He performed them. He knew how to tap into the public's fears, frustrations, and desires. He gave them simple answers to complex problems. Who was to blame for Germany's suffering? According to Hitler, it was the November criminals who signed the Versailles Treaty, the communists, and most insidiously, the Jews, who he scapegoated as an internal enemy profiting from Germany's misery. What was the solution? Hitler promised to restore German greatness, to create jobs, to defy the Treaty of Versailles. and to unite the German people into a powerful, racially pure Volksgemeinschaft, or people's community. To a nation on its knees, this message was incredibly seductive. It offered hope, a sense of belonging, and a target for their rage. The Nazi Party was also masterfully organized. While other parties were bickering in parliament, the Nazis were on the streets. Their paramilitary wing, the SA, or brown shirts, fought communists in the streets, creating an image of being the only ones who could restore order. Their propaganda, led by Joseph Goebbels, was relentless. They used modern techniques, posters, rallies, radio, and film to spread their message and build a cult of personality around Hitler as Germany's savior. They weren't just a political party. They were a movement that offered a sense of purpose and excitement, especially to the young and unemployed. They organized soup kitchens and social programs, showing that they cared about the common person in a way the distant government didn't seem to. But even with all this, the Nazis never won an outright majority in a free election. The highest they ever got was around 37% of the vote in July 1932. This is the crucial, often overlooked part of the story. Hitler didn't seize power. It was handed to him. How? Through a series of backroom political deals and catastrophic misjudgments by the traditional conservative elite. These were the old guard politicians, aristocrats, and business leaders like President Paul von Hindenburg. They despised the chaos of the Weimar Republic and feared a communist takeover even more than they feared the Nazis. They looked at Hitler, this loud, unrefined upstart, and thought they could use him. They believed they could appoint him as chancellor, surround him with their own conservative ministers, and control him. They thought they could tame the Nazi movement and use its popular support for their own ends, and then cast him aside when he was no longer needed. It was one of the greatest political miscalculations in history. In January 1933, President Hindenburg reluctantly appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. The conservatives thought they had him in a box. They were wrong. Hitler had no intention of being a puppet. Within weeks of taking office, a fire mysteriously broke out in the Reichstag, the parliament building. Hitler immediately blamed the communists and convinced President Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag fire decree. This emergency decree suspended basic civil liberties, freedom of speech, assembly, and the press. It was the legal death knell for German democracy. It gave the Nazis the power to arrest political opponents without cause. The final step was the Enabling Act of March 1933, pushed through a parliament missing many of its opposition members who had been arrested or were in hiding. This law effectively gave Hitler the power to rule by decree, to pass laws without the consent of parliament. The conservatives who thought they could control him had given him the very tools he needed to establish a total dictatorship. So the rise of Hitler wasn't a sudden event. It was a perfect storm, a gradual erosion of democracy fueled by the humiliation of war. Deep economic crises, political weakness, and the fatal arrogance of those who thought they could control extremism for their own benefit. It's a sobering reminder that democracy is fragile and that in times of crisis, people can be swayed by simple, hateful promises from those who seek absolute power. Understanding this history is not just about looking at the past. It's a vital lesson for our present and our future. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this deep dive interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.